The last 24 hours of Elvis Presley. August 15th, 1977 began like any other day at Graceland. Elvis Presley went through his usual routines and was preparing for yet another tour. To those around him, everything seemed normal, but something felt different. The following day, the world would lose the king of rock and roll in a way no one had expected. Elvis Presley, known as the King of Rock and Roll, led an extremely busy life. From recording new songs and performing concerts to acting in Hollywood films, he was constantly in motion. But toward the end of 1967, his albums began to fall short of earlier successes. Of the 8 Presley singles released between 1967 and 1968, only 2 made it into the top 40, and none charted higher than number 28. He began a comeback with the '68 Comeback Special, his first live performance since 1961. John Landau of I Magazine wrote, "There's something magical about watching a man who had lost himself find his way home." He sang with an intensity no longer expected of rock and roll singers. Inspired by this success, he resumed touring. In 1973 alone, he performed 168 concerts and continued touring in 1974. On October 9, 1973, Elvis and his wife Priscilla finalized their divorce. That same year, he overdosed on drugs multiple times, was frequently hospitalized, and even fell into a coma that lasted 3 days. His nurse later wrote in her book, he was unhappy. He was depressed about aging and not having a woman he loved. He missed Priscilla. His friends would always bring him pretty 17 or 18-year-old girls, but he had nothing in common with them. Although he continued performing regularly, people began to notice that something was wrong. At one concert at the University of Maryland, he collapsed while getting out of the limousine. Guitarist John Wilkinson said, "He was completely bloated. His speech was slurred and it was obvious he was under the influence of drugs. You could tell right away something wasn't right with his body. It was so bad the words to his songs were barely understandable. I remember crying. He could hardly get through the announcements." In November 1976, he began a relationship with Ginger Alden, who was nearly 20 years younger than he was. 2 months later, Elvis proposed to her and gave her an engagement ring crafted from the diamond in his own ring. Around this time, he also developed a food addiction. According to the New York Daily News, Elvis consumed enough calories daily to feed several people. He loved hamburgers and fried breads, which increasingly affected both his health and appearance, something many people began to notice. A journalist wrote in early 1977, Presley had become a grotesque caricature of his once slim, energetic self. Severely overweight and mentally dulled by daily medication, he could barely struggle through his shortened concerts. In addition to his food addiction, he battled a dependency on drugs. Due to numerous health problems, Elvis began taking prescription medications. But the issue was that he became increasingly dependent on them, eventually consuming them in large quantities. It was later revealed that he had a private physician who prescribed him whatever drugs he asked for. It is said that Dr. Nick prescribed Elvis over 12,000 pills in the last 20 months of his life. Dr. Nick justified this by saying that Presley believed that as long as the drugs came from a doctor, he wasn't the typical junkie buying off the street. Food addiction, drug dependency, a stressful schedule, and declining health all pointed to a life on a dangerous path. His final live performance took place on June 26, 1977 in Indianapolis, where he puzzled the audience by using part of the show to introduce everyone from his life on stage. After his death, many suspected that deep down he knew this would be his last performance. As he left the stage, he said, "Until we meet again, God bless. Adios." 50 days later, he would live his final 24 hours. Monday, August 15, 1977, was another ordinary day at Graceland. At 4 p.m., Elvis woke up in his mansion and spent the day with his daughter and his fiancée Ginger. At 10:30 p.m., Ginger and Elvis visited a dentist as Elvis had a toothache. He was prescribed painkillers, and at 12:30 a.m., they returned home, where they were seen by fans who captured the last photo ever taken of him. He was wearing a black jacket and large, dark sunglasses. At 2:15 a.m., he called Dr. Nick and requested more painkillers, which the doctor provided. Elvis then sent his stepbrother to the pharmacy to pick up the medication, which he took immediately upon his return. At 4 a.m., he called his cousin Billy and Billy's wife Jo to play racquetball. While 4 a.m. might seem like an unusual time to most, it wasn't for Elvis and his housemates. He loved to sleep during the day and record at night. They played a short game, and when it began to rain, they went to the piano, where Elvis started singing gospel songs, and then the ballad Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. After his cousins left, Ginger and Elvis went to their bedroom, where he took another packet of prescription medication meant to help him sleep. But as he still couldn't fall asleep, he took a second packet at 7 a.m. Since he was scheduled to fly to Portland, Maine at 7 p.m. for a concert, he desperately tried to get some rest. But by 8 a.m., he was still awake. His nurse gave him another small packet of medication for his insomnia. All the while, his only daughter was in her bedroom next door. At 9:30 a.m., he told Ginger he was going to the bathroom. Because he suffered from chronic constipation and often spent long periods in the bathroom, Ginger asked him not to fall asleep there, to which Elvis spoke his last words, "I won't." Ginger fell asleep, and when she awoke at 2 p.m., she noticed he hadn't returned to bed. When she opened the door, she saw him lying on the floor and initially thought he had fallen and hit his head. In her memoirs, she wrote, "His arms were lying at his sides on the floor, palms facing up." She called for the on-duty staff and an ambulance was summoned. At 2:33 p.m., emergency responders arrived. According to a statement, an ambulance from Memphis Fire Department's Engine House 29 at 2147 Elvis Presley Boulevard responded to the call at 2:33 p.m. And by 2:56 p.m., Presley was at Baptist Hospital, 7 miles from his home in Whitehaven. At approximately 3:30 p.m., Elvis was pronounced dead, and by 4 p.m., the press had received word of the news. An autopsy was conducted the same day, but the report was immediately sealed by the family for 50 years, fueling numerous conspiracy theories. Dan Warlick, the chief investigator, added fuel to the popular theory regarding his death, stating, "Elvis's chronic constipation, the result of years of abusing prescription drugs and consuming fatty, high-cholesterol food, led to what's called a Valsalva maneuver. Simply put, the pressure of trying to have a bowel movement compressed the singer's abdominal aorta and caused his heart to fail." Some claimed he had died of a drug overdose. However, when the case was re-examined in 1994, forensic pathologist Joseph Davis disagreed, saying, "The position of Elvis Presley's body suggested he was about to sit down on the toilet when the seizure occurred. He fell forward onto the carpet, his buttocks raised, and he was dead before he hit the floor. If it had been a drug overdose, he would have gradually drifted into a deep sleep. He would have pulled up his pajama bottoms and crawled to the door for help. It takes hours to die from drugs." The results of the autopsy are set to be released in 2027.